Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise. The clerk has an amendment of LCO 8707. I ask that the clerk call the amendment and I be allowed to summarize.
And will the clerk please call LCO number 8707, which will be designated as House Amendment A.
House Amendment Schedule A, LCO number 8707, offered by Representative Claridis, Representative Candelora et al.
The representative seeks leave of the chamber to summarize. Is there objection? Hearing none, Representative France.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And as was pointed out so aptly by Representative Devlin in her introduction and comments on the amendment as proposed, when we met in December of 2015 to first take on this constitutional amendment, it was in the guise of a need to enact discipline, as was pointed out. It's the will of the legislature that has been lacking, that has allowed monies not to be put into the lockbox called the Special Transportation Fund. And at that time, ironically, when we were sitting here in this chamber 18 months ago or so, at that same time we were talking about locking up special transportation funds, the very next action that we took swept $35.2 million from that fund. So once again, it's an indicator that the will of the legislature is the problem, with why we're sitting here today having to budget by Constitution instead of really enacting law and budget that represents the people of this state. On top of that, that will has been lacking in the budget proposals that have been produced so far, that have been discussed, because it further sweeps the money in the fiscal year 18 and 19, ultimately leaving a zero balance in the projected zero balance in the Special Transportation Fund in FY20, creating a crisis to really create an illusion for the people of Connecticut, thinking we need to create more money. We need tolls, we need other revenues, we need increased gas tax. We don't have enough money to meet our infrastructure needs. And that is why we have now proposed an alternate amendment. And as I summarize, one of the things that was lacking in the current amendment as proposed and was discussed and debated 18 months ago in special session was it allowed modification by statute. It allowed essentially, as long as it was authorized by statute, which really didn't lock up anything. It also didn't specify with enough detail the sources of revenue, nor did it specify what that money could be spent on. So the amendment that has been proposed as a change here in lines 12 through 14 is where it talks about the sources of revenue and as of the date adopted. So it codifies all the sources that are currently being used and going into the Special Transportation Fund are now locked therein. And it goes on in lines 14 through 17 to add any further monies that are added to that Special Transportation are also locked up in the box. And following that, in lines 19 to 22, it does describe transportation purposes, but it goes a step further. And in lines 23 through 32, we actually define what transportation purposes are. And in there, they are for capital expenditures for capital projects. And it further defines them as planning, construction, maintenance, repair, or improvement of highways, sidewalks, bridges, mass transit, rail stations, ports, and airports. And in addition, it includes the operating costs paid with the resources of special transportation during our current fiscal year. So we now defined exactly what the transportation expenses that are authorized to be expended, which the current amendment as proposed does not do. And in addition, it further limits in the last part of that final section to limit the increase of those operating costs to a maximum of 3% per year, further limiting the ability to grow the requirements and the levy on the taxpayers of Connecticut. And then finally, in lines 33 to 36, it provides a provision for any citizen of the state of Connecticut to file court and gives standing for them to file court to hold this legislature accountable. That is something that is also not in the current proposal. And with that, Madam Speaker, I recommend approval and ask for roll call vote on the amendment.